The humid San Diego air hung heavy in the massive drill hall, thick with the scent of floor wax, metal polish, and the collective anxiety of 1,440 young men on the cusp of becoming United States Navy SEALs. They sat in perfect, silent rows, their backs ramrod straight, eyes fixed forward. This was a pivotal moment in their grueling training, a mandatory lecture on protocol and discipline. For weeks, they had been pushed beyond exhaustion, and their bodies battered by surf torture and their minds tested by constant sleep deprivation. But today, they were simply an audience, and the man pacing the low stage at the front of the hall was the main attraction. He was a Master Chief, a living legend within the SEAL teams. His chest was a roadmap of deployments, a wall of colorful ribbons and gold badges that spoke of combat jumps and classified operations. His face was weathered and tanned, bearing the hard edges of a man who had spent 2 decades at the tip of the spear. His voice, a gravelly bark that needed no microphone to carry to the back of the cavernous space, was the stuff of BUD/S lore. He was there to deliver what the instructors called a heart-to-heart. A blunt, unfiltered talk about what it meant to wear the trident, about the honor, the sacrifice, and the unbreakable brotherhood of the teams. For the first 20 minutes, his lecture was classic SEAL fare, and he spoke of leaving no one behind, of mental toughness, of being a silent professional. The students drank it in, feeling the weight of the legacy they were fighting to join. But then, the tone shifted. The Master Chief's voice dropped to a conspiratorial growl as he began to rail against the new Navy. He complained about political correctness, about rules of engagement that tied their hands, about a culture he felt was making them soft. He was testing them. The pushing to see who would blindly accept his every word and who was thinking for themselves. It was a subtle form of intimidation, and for the most part, it worked. No one dared move. Among the students, a woman sat near the center of the formation. She was a Navy officer, a lieutenant, and one of the few females in the room. She wasn't a SEAL candidate. She was support personnel, required to attend the lecture as part of her own leadership curriculum. She listened intently, her face unreadable, and her posture perfect. She had heard speeches like this before, the casual sexism and hazing disguised as tradition. But she had also spent years in a male-dominated world, learning to pick her battles. She was there to observe, not to engage. The Master Chief continued his verbal strut, weaving tales of his own heroism. He spoke of a difficult choice he had made on a deployment, a decision that had saved lives but bent the rules. And he presented it as a lesson in prioritizing your men over everything else. He looked out at the sea of young faces, soaking in their rapt attention. He was in his element, the undisputed alpha. Then his eyes scanned the room and landed on the lieutenant. A flicker of something, annoyance, perhaps, or a desire to provoke a reaction, crossed his face. He stopped his story mid-sentence. "You!" he barked, pointing a thick finger in her direction. The silence in the room became absolute, and a physical pressure. All 1,440 students seemed to hold their breath. "You're a woman. What are you even doing here? This is a lecture for men who are going to become SEALs, not a coffee social for officers." It was a direct, humiliating challenge designed to put her in her place and get a laugh from the troops. A few nervous chuckles rippled through the ranks. The lieutenant felt her face burn, but she kept her expression neutral, her eyes locked on a point just above his head. Once she didn't respond. Her silence seemed to embolden him. "I'm serious," he pressed, taking a step closer to the edge of the stage. "You think you have what it takes to understand this life? You think you can sit there and judge us? Let me tell you something." His voice rose to a full-throated roar. "Don't forget, I'm a Navy SEAL." He paused for effect, letting the declaration hang in the air. The insignia on his uniform, the trident, felt like a weapon he was now pointing directly at her. And the lecture devolved after that. He shot her pointed looks for the remainder of the hour, his tone dripping with condescension whenever he made a general point about toughness. When the session was finally dismissed, the students began to file out in a controlled chaos of whispered conversations. The Master Chief hopped off the stage, accepting congratulations from a few junior instructors who clustered around him. He was laughing, the tension of the lecture gone, so replaced by the easy confidence of a man who had just re-established the natural order. The lieutenant, however, did not file out. She waited until the crowd thinned, then began walking toward the stage. Her heart hammered against her ribs, but her stride was steady. She wasn't going to shout or cause a scene. She was going to do something far more dangerous in a place like this. She was going to hold him accountable. As she approached, the small circle of instructors turned to look at her, their smiles fading. The Master Chief's eyes narrowed. He opened his mouth to deliver another dismissive remark, but she was faster. She stopped right in front of him, looked him directly in the eye, and in a calm, clear voice that cut through the remaining chatter in the hall, she said, "Master Chief, a word. Now." It was a command, not a request, delivered with the kind of quiet authority that outranks any badge or ribbon. The Master Chief blinked, caught completely off guard, and the laughter died in his throat. For a moment he looked confused, then angry. But her gaze didn't waver. In that frozen second, the dynamic had shifted. The student, still filtering out the far doors, sensed the change in the air and slowed, turning to watch. The junior instructors took an unconscious step back, suddenly eager to be elsewhere. The Master Chief was alone, face to face with the woman he had just publicly humiliated, and she was not backing down. She had his full, undivided attention, and the real confrontation was about to begin. The lieutenant held the Master Chief's gaze, refusing to be the first to blink. The few remaining instructors shuffled their feet, suddenly fascinated by the floor. The distant sounds of students exiting the building faded away, leaving the two of them in a bubble of tense silence in the middle of the cavernous hall. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Her calm, a measured tone was a stark contrast to his earlier barking, and it made her words land with the force of precision-guided munitions. "Master Chief," she began, her voice steady, "you have approximately 20 years of service. You have multiple combat deployments. You have a wall of medals that suggests you have, on many occasions, exemplified the very best of what a chief petty officer should be. You are, by all accounts, a professional." She paused, letting the compliment hang. He shifted his weight, a flicker of confusion in his eyes. He wasn't used to being addressed this way by a junior officer, especially not one he'd just tried to humiliate. "That's what makes what you did in there so disappointing," she continued, her eyes never leaving his. "You used your rank, your reputation, and this platform not to teach, not to inspire, but to belittle. You singled me out, not because of anything I did, but because I am a woman in your space. You used your status as a SEAL, as a weapon, to intimidate someone you perceived as weaker." The Master Chief's face hardened, a flush of anger creeping up his neck. He opened his mouth to speak, to cut her off, but she held up a single placating hand. It was a gesture of command, and against his every instinct he paused. "You asked what I was doing here," she said. "I'm here to learn about the culture of the units I will be supporting, and in the last hour, you have given me and every single one of those 1,440 students a masterclass in exactly what's wrong with it. You taught them that respect is a one-way street. You taught them that leadership is about intimidation. You taught them that it's acceptable to use their hard-earned status to demean others." She gestured subtly toward the door where the last of the students had vanished. "Those young men out there? They just learned that if they want to be like you, they need to be bullies. You just undid weeks of training on brotherhood and professionalism with one 45-minute tantrum. Was it worth it? The flush on his neck had reached his face. He was a man unaccustomed to being challenged, especially by someone he had dismissed as an outsider. He took a half-step forward, his jaw tight. "You don't have the slightest idea what you're talking about," he growled, his voice low and threatening. You haven't earned the right." "I've earned the right to be treated with the professional courtesy dictated by Navy regulations and basic human decency," she interrupted, her voice finally gaining an edge. "You don't get to check those at the door because you have a trident on your chest. You want to talk about earning things? Fine. I've earned my commission, I've earned my qualifications, and I have earned the right to sit in any briefing I am ordered to attend without being used as a prop for your ego." The junior instructors had melted away entirely, leaving the two of them standing alone. The Master Chief was breathing heavily, his fists clenched at his sides. He was a fighter, a killer, a man whose entire career was built on overwhelming force. Every instinct screamed at him to crush this challenge, to put her in her place with a verbal blow that would leave her reeling. He was a Navy SEAL, for God's sake.